Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, head of DevRel here at Dremio, and this is going to be a about hour-long self-guided workshop. So the idea here is you can watch this on demand and kind of go through this same experience that I'm going to be showing you here anytime you'd like to get better familiar with the Dremio Lakehouse platform, the Agentic Lakehouse platform. Now, what does that mean? Okay, its bottom line is that Dremio provides you a platform that makes it easy not only to execute on a data lakehouse, that's going to allow you to treat your data lake as your data warehouse, which provides you all sorts of new flexibility and cost savings, but also better to execute on the dream of agentic AI and being able to allow much better access to your data from your business users and to be able to create AI agents. Now, how does that all come together? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to get hands-on so you can see what you would use this for. Okay, so basically, here I am at Dremio.com. First thing I'm going to do is go click on Get Started for free. Okay, so bottom line is you can now sign up for a free trial that requires no upfront credit card, requires you no need to bring your own cloud infrastructure upfront. You can get started from day one just by signing up and putting in your email. So you can sign up using one of different single sign-on options like Google, Microsoft, or GitHub, or you can just put in your email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my work email, except I'm going to use Google's fancy plus thingy, where you can kind of create infinite emails by doing this. Okay, and I'm going to create a new account. Okay, so now what's going to happen is I'm going to get an email to confirm my email. So I should be getting this in my email box, and there it is. I have that on a separate screen, so that way you don't see my email. But yeah, so let me go click on this Activate Your Dremio Account email. And that's going to bring me to this tab. So I bring that over. Okay, where I'm going to create my password. So I will do that. Okay. And no thanks. Cool. And so the next step is then to name your project. Now, basically, the way you want to think about Dremio is that by creating a new fresh account, what I'm doing is I'm creating a new organization. And an organization can be made up of one or many projects. Okay, so the way to think about it is that your organization is your Apache Polaris instance. Okay, so basically the Dremio catalog is backed by Apache Polaris. And then every project is going to represent one catalog in that instance of Apache Polaris, or that realm in Apache Polaris. And if you don't know what Apache Polaris is, don't worry about it. Just think about it this way. You have an organization, and then you can chop up all your data. You can chop up your data into different projects or have it all in one project. But the name of the project cannot change, so you want to make sure that you name it what you want to name it. I'm just going to take out the dash and just call it first project. Okay, just to keep it simple. You can then choose which region you would like to do this in. Right now there are 2 regions available, but more will be added, and also more clouds will be added for being the backing store of your projects. Now, if you have data stored in other clouds, in other Iceberg catalogs, those will all be able to be connected to Dremio. So it doesn't mean you can't use those. It's just what can you use as the backing store of your default catalog. Okay, so creating my project, that's it. That's literally all it took to sign up. Okay, so all I did was basically put in my email, confirm my email, set up my password, and then just choose my first project name. That's going to take me to this screen where it's going to begin setting up my environment. So right now it's basically provisioning my Dremio Lakehouse. So this will take about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, but just while we do that, just to show you a little bit about the UI, down here, for each individual user, you have your account settings. This is going to be generally where you set up your personal or access tokens or PAT tokens. This is where these will be what you need to connect external tools. Like let's say you want to connect like Apache Spark to your Dremio catalog or other things. Basically, any kind of external authentication will be using PAT tokens. Here you can just see your general information about your account. Nothing crazy there. Okay, and we can see that the environment is almost ready. And then over here, you'll see settings. And there's generally going to be 2 categories of settings. There's going to be project settings in organization settings. So again, you have one organization. So my new account just created a new organization, which basically my organization can be made up of many projects. So I can see, again, I've already created one project that's being provisioned. And I can have other users. So again, that one organization can have lots of users who can then be given access to these different projects, which can represent different sort of organizations of data. I can then also create roles, so that way I don't have to always grant every individual user the same permissions over and over again. I can instead create a role, grant the permissions I want to that role, so that way I can just assign users to those roles to make it much easier to give users the exact privileges that they need by just assigning them the role that they need. And you can see a bunch of other really fun sort of things here, like general information about your project, about your organization. You can change your organization name, so I could edit this and just call it whatever organization I'd like. Okay. Here's your cost management panel, which you can use to kind of just see cost information. Again, this is a new organization, so there's not going to be much information here. But basically, when you decide that you do want to adopt Dremio and put down like a credit card for payment, here's where you can kind of manage all that. Authentication, so you can just say, hey, what are the different ways that users can authenticate? So in this case, let's say you just want to make sure that every user only authenticates through Google. You can choose that. You can also add providers if you have particular use cases or particular ways of authenticating for your particular company. Here you can configure sort of BI tools, external token providers. Okay, as if you need that. OAuth applications. Again, we already talked about projects. And then again, AI configurations, where you'll notice in a second that Dremio has a built-in AI agent. It's going to, by default, use a Dremio managed LLM, which is essentially OpenAI. Basically, we manage it, and then that'll be part of the things that draw down your credits. So anytime you're using something that's Dremio managed, whether it's Dremio Query Engine, Dremio Managed Storage for your catalog, or Dremio Managed LLM for your AI agent, those will draw down your Dremio credits as you use them. But you always have the option to bring your own AI model. You have the option to bring your own storage, because Dremio is an open platform. Okay, so now our environment is ready to go, and we can tell because we have now the ability to actually click on all these things. And generally, one of the first things you may want to do when working with Dremio is to add data to Dremio. And you can do that simply by clicking here on Add Data. And there are two ways that you can add data to Dremio. You could upload a file, okay, like a CSV, JSON, or Parquet file. Or you can connect some sort of other source of data. So if you already have pre-existing Iceberg catalogs, you can connect those. If you have a data lake with like Parquet and CSV files that you want to run analytics on, you can connect those. Okay. If you have databases or data warehouses with tables that you would like to be able to push down queries to, okay, there's several of those options as well. So you have a lot of places where you can connect to curate your data lakehouse. And again, that list of connectors will continue to grow. Now, all that data you connect to Dremio will all be visible here in the Dataset Explorer. So essentially, what you want to look at this is that there's sort of two sections. So you see here, there's a section called Namespaces. Again, every project represents one catalog in your Dremio account. Okay, so this project has its default catalog, which is what you see here. Now, your first project, when you first sign up, is using the Dremio managed storage. Okay, so that way you can just try things out, whatnot. If later on you decide that you want to adopt Dremio fully and would like to use your own storage, you would just create a new project that then configures your preferred cloud storage as its sort of as its default storage for that catalog. But this one is using the Dremio managed storage because it's the first project in a trial account. And it has automatically a set of Dremio sample data that you can fetch in there. So you have the catalog, and then the namespaces are the subsections of that catalog. So I can create, like, sometimes you might want to do it like department, create one that says like, accounting, finance, whatnot. You can do that. For our purposes, because I have a lot of sort of pre-made SQL that assumes that you're going to have a namespace called Dremio. So you're going to want to create a namespace called Dremio, and that's going to be a place where we can create SQL views, create Iceberg tables. Okay. Essentially, within any of these namespaces, we can create views or Iceberg tables. And then later on, I'll show you that this catalog can then be accessible externally. Now, sources, This sources section is where you can connect those external data sources. So if I click here, it's just going to take me to the list of different data sources, and I can connect whichever data source is relevant to my business. So again, you don't have to move all your data to Iceberg on day one. You can begin using Dremio with the data that you already have where it already is. And then down here, we have the Add Data button, which gives you the option to upload or add a data source. Now, just to keep in mind, when you do an upload of data, it's actually going to allow you to, it's going to turn it into an Iceberg table in your catalog. So you'll get to choose where to create that Iceberg table within your namespaces. Okay, cool. Now let's actually just show you like what it's like to create a table in Dremio. So we see here that we have this home button where we have the AI agent and some shortcut buttons. We said that we have the Dataset Explorer where I can explore the data that I have available in Dremio. And then here you have the SQL runner, which is a built-in SQL IDE experience. Now you don't have to write SQL inside of Dremio. Dremio has the ability to, you can connect to Dremio via JDBC, ODBC, via Apache Aeroflug, via REST API, and use any of those interfaces to send it SQL that it can then run. So again, you don't have to operate. So for people who are, maybe application developers who want to build applications on top of Dremio, they can do that. But for your business users who are going to log into Dremio, explore the data sets, and maybe want to curate some views, you have this great built-in SQL experience. So for example, I'm going to create a table. Okay, so first we're just going to do this by saying create table. Now I'm going to do it in that Dremio namespace. So I'm going to say Dremio.test will be the name of the table. Then I have to pass in the schema of the table. We'll just make it one column. So name, which will be a varchar column. I do a semicolon. I can run multiple SQL statements within the same run of the SQL runner, which is pretty nice. So now I can actually also write my insert into logic, insert into Dremio.test values. And notice, you see that it has suggestions and basically again syntax hiding. Since I didn't complete the query, it's telling me that there's a incorrect syntax here. I just need to complete it, and then we see that's highlighted and go away. So you get those nice quality of life experiences that you're used to in any IDE. On top of it, many of the same sort of keyboard shortcuts that you grow to expect here too. Okay, on top of it, right over here, you have this function lookup. So if you want to use any of Dremio's many SQL functions, they're all listed here for easy access. And later on, we'll talk a little bit more about these AI functions that will allow you to work with unstructured data in the Dremio warehouse, which is pretty sweet. So I'm just going to close up those functions. Boop. Okay, and on top of that, you can also have the AI agent help you in working with your data at any time by clicking anytime you see this little symbol here. That is the AI agent symbol, and I can click that to open up the AI agent to do things. Here are some suggestions like you explore data sets, help write SQL, help analyze the results, and so forth. Okay, so I'm just going to close that up. And then last, what I'm going to do is I'm going to query that data set after we create it. So select star from Dremio.test. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position my cursor up here and hit run to run the SQL. And notice that here where we see the results, okay, I can now get a tab for each query. So that way when I look at the results, I can be like, okay, let me see the results for the create table, and I can see that the table was created successfully. Then I can click on query 2 once that query 2 is complete, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so now I can see here that the record was inserted, and last, now we're querying the table, and I can see that I was able to query the data. Okay, so wonderful. That all worked successfully. Now let's say I want to run this query again someday. What I can do, or I want to run this sequence of queries a day, I can save this as a script. So see, I can see here, say script as. We'll call this test script. And then now that shows up under here, under scripts, so that way I can bring that code back up. So this would be great for jobs that I might want to run on a regular basis where I might need to change a few values, or templates that I want to save to iterate off of, so that way I'm not rewriting the same SQL over and over again. On top of that, what you see here on the right, this allows you to explore the data that's in Dremio. So I can do something like select star from, but if I don't want to type in the whole name of the table, I can just drag the name of the table in to the SQL runner for much easier writing. And let's say I want to even like break it down even further into columns, and I don't want to have to type in the name of the column per se. I can just drag that in there as well. Okay, so select name from Dremio.test. And then I can just go run that query. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so this is again all to make it much easier for you to be able to write queries. And one more thing to show you is I notice I had to write Dremio.test. Maybe I don't want to write Dremio.test. There's this little context switcher here where I can choose a context of this next of the run of the query. So I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to set the Dremio folder as the context. So it's going to assume Dremio. I don't have to write that out anymore. Now I can just do select star from test. Okay, and then this will work just in this, like before when I typed in Dremio.test, because the query is being run from the context of the Dremio folder. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Now, I also have several other sort of, actually, one other change I'm going to want to make, just for demonstration purposes here, is that in my catalog settings, so if I go back to settings, you'll see that there's project settings. So now that we have our project working, I am able to basically now change the settings for my project. So let me click on that. And what you're going to see here is the name of your project. Again, your Oregon project ID, what region this particular project is doing. You can see that this is using Dremio Managed Storage. Again, you can create new projects that would use your storage if you prefer. You'll see that this JDBC URL, if you want to connect Dremio via JDBC, and then you'll see an MCP endpoint. This is so you can configure other like AI tools to talk to Dremio, like Claude or ChatGPT or your own custom AI agent. I'll show you how you use that a little bit later on. But what I want to do is go over here, the catalog. And what I want to do is change how often the metadata refreshes. Okay. So I'm going to change, actually I want to change the metadata refresh to every minute. Okay. Only query data sets. Okay, and I'm going to just change it to that. So that way it just fetches the metadata on my tables a little bit faster. And the reason I'm doing that is just because later on I'm going to want to show you the lineage view of these data sets, and that's going to require whenever the lineage view updates every time the metadata refresh happens. Okay, cool. So now let's run some sample SQL. I have a whole variety of different sample SQL scripts that you can run. I'll put the URL in the video description. I have it right over here, workshop. Okay, and that's going to be right here in this industry examples case. So any of these should be runnable as they are, all as long as you have that Dremio namespace created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the government example this time. Okay, and you can see it's a variety of SQL. These are actually fun scripts to go read and kind of see how they're all laid out, so you can see exactly what they're doing. But I'm going to copy that into here, and it's just to kind of go through the SQL. Let me get it running. But if you take a look at the SQL while that runs, essentially what we're doing is we're creating some namespaces. So first we're creating a gov namespace for this example inside the Dremio namespace, so a gov folder, and then a ROG silver gold folder inside of there. We're then creating a table that represents 311 requests, and then some sample records, and then inserting some sample records into it. Then we're creating another table that represents work orders, and inserting some records into there. Okay, and then we're going to create views. One of the beautiful things about Dremio is you can create your bronze, silver, gold layers without having to actually physically manifest tables each layer. You can use SQL views to define sort of your silver and your gold versions of your data on that raw data. Okay, so again, basically our tables represent our raw view, and then here we see like our silver view is a view that's this SQL right here. Okay, and then we create another gold data set that represents like some particular metric that we'd want to use as a separate gold layer view, and then we create like one other view over here. Okay, so that's what's going on in the SQL. All that SQL has completed running, as we can see here. And the cool thing is like on that original page, you can kind of see how long each thing took to run, along with all the information on it, and then again all the individual query results that I can look through over here. Okay, wonderful. Okay, so now let me go take a look at my Dataset Explorer. Now, if I go to the Dremio here, I should be able to see that now we have the Gov folder. And I can see that here are my raw data sets. And notice that they're purple. Whenever you see a purple data set, this represents a physical data set, meaning this is an actual physical table that represents a little iceberg symbol. So this is a physical iceberg table that represents Parquet files that are sitting in my storage. And then as you notice, that if I highlight it, a little tooltip pops up in which I can kind of see some metadata, like sort of like the different columns in the table. And you also see these like Tableau and Power BI buttons that I can then use to quickly bring up this data set in Tableau or BI. Now, generally, any BI tool that can use JDBC can connect to Dremio using that JDBC connection, but these are just like sort of one-click integrations for Power BI and Tableau. I can quickly get to the details panel and lineage, all from just like using this tooltip. I could also notice I can copy the name of the table from there, and then I also have these options here. So I can open the details panel here. Okay, I can go to the table over here, and then I can change like table settings. And just to show you some of the table settings, basically you have a feature called Reflections. Okay, now reflections are sort of like basically Dremio's answer to materialized views and BI cubes. I'm going to cover this a little bit later on in more detail, but see, theoretically here I can start configuring reflections on this data set. I can configure how often they should refresh. Now, since it's an Iceberg table, we have lots of options here. I can set a specific schedule for it to refresh, or I can actually do a live refresh, which means Dremio will detect when that table changes, and then I'll automatically update these materializations when that table changes. And since it's Iceberg table, if it's Iceberg tables, it can do so incrementally. Cool. So there's that now, or I can even just trigger a one-off refresh whenever I feel like it. Then there's table optimization. Any table that's inside Dremio's catalog, Dremio can then automatically maintain for you. So have you ever heard about Iceberg tables or any Lakehouse tables where you have to do sort of regular optimization of the table and regular cleanup of the table? Dremio can do this automatically for you. It will automatically do this for you for any tables you create inside Dremio catalog, but you can turn it off if you don't want Dremio to do it, in case you're doing that yourself externally. Okay, but otherwise Dremio will clean this up so that way you just generally don't have to think about that. And I can assign privileges and say, hey, who has access to this table and what level of access? Can they write to the table? Can they read the metadata of the table? Can they query the table? Can they alter the table settings? Can they view or create reflections? Can they manage permissions on this table? What level of access do they have? Okay, so I can do all that from table settings. But then if I click on the table name, it'll take me here where I can just go query the table. Okay, straight to the SQL runner. Huzzah. Okay, and we can see the results right there down below of this view. Okay, and actually, I didn't explicitly say this, but let me just clarify this. Whenever you see a green data set, that's the SQL view. So that's not a physical copy. That's not like another set of Parquet files that are existing on your storage. Instead, that's a SQL view, a curated view of an existing table. I'm saying, hey, I don't want to see the whole table. I just want to see the results of this specific SQL when I click on this data set. Okay, and that's a great way for you to just expose what you want to expose to your users. You create views based on what you want your users to see and give them access to the views, not to the raw tables. Okay, and then, if you ever need to improve the performance of queries on those views, that's where you use reflections. Okay, but now I want to show you the details panel. So for any data set, I can open this details panel. Okay, so by clicking on this symbol right here. And that's going to take me to this screen. So basically, this screen has 4 tabs. So we'll go through each of these 4 tabs. There is the data tab. This shows you the actual query that defines the view, if it's a view. Okay, there's the details tab. This is where you start seeing like the semantic layer information. So for example, here I see like a list of different columns so I can see what the schema of the table is. I can see some other metadata about the table over here. Okay, and I can again launch into a BI tool. Here I can actually create a wiki. We'll come back to that. And here I can actually tag the dataset. These will make the dataset much more searchable using the search bar over here. And again, I'll come back to that. Then there's the lineage view. Okay, I'll let that open up. Cool. And you can actually see that this table, this view, was created as a join from work orders in 311, the two raw views. And you can see that it is the parent of the two gold views. Okay, and then I can click on any of these and explore these more in depth, see their metadata, kind of just see how this whole journey kind of works out. So I get this nice lineage view to help understand how the data in my setup was kind of curated, how it was created. And then this fourth tab, here I could create reflections. So again, if I needed to speed it up, if I wanted to create something that's more like a materialized view, I would create a raw reflection because I'm looking to accelerate raw queries on it where they're querying the actual rows. Now, if it's like a BI dashboard where you're talking about like a lot of roll-up type statistics, so like mins, maxes, averages, sums, stuff like that, then I'm going to want to use aggregate reflections, okay, because aggregate reflections will then allow me to choose which dimensions and measures I want to optimize for, and it'll create like a BI cube-like structure underneath that Dremio will manage. Now, either way, it's really creating these things as Iceberg tables that it manages in your storage, and then we'll swap them out when needed. Okay, just to show you an example, I'm going to create a raw reflection on this table and just hit save. Okay, and while that generates, let me just explain what that does. Right now, this was a view. So this was a SQL view. So theoretically, if I were to run a query on this SQL view, it would first run the SQL from this view, which would then run those queries back on these tables. So basically, you always end up going back to these tables, and you're running this query again to run this query. Okay, which can be fine in a lot of situations. Dremio is very fast, very powerful, and knows how to do this intelligently. But sometimes it may still not be as fast as you'd like, and you want to skip that step. So by creating a reflection here, going forward, when I query these two views, it's only going to run this SQL. It doesn't have to run this SQL again, because technically there's a reflection behind the scenes, a cache of those results that it can then just swap in. Okay, and we'll show you that at work in a second. But once it's created, you can see that, hey, it created a reflection that's about 27.6 kilobytes. Okay, and right now you can see most of my queries have not been accelerated. So you see when I queried that request enriched table 4, it was not accelerated, so it was running that query all over again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back there. First, I'm going to go back to that silver view and run the query again on request enriched. Okay, and done. Okay, now let's take a look at the job panel. Okay, and I can see this time it did use the reflection. That's what these little lightning bolts mean. It means, hey, this query, we took advantage of one of Dremio's acceleration features to make this query faster than it would have been if we had just ran the query by itself without any kind of acceleration magic. So you're seeing like, hey, these are the queries where Dremio is doing. It's not just being fast, but it's doing some extra cool Dremio magical stuff for you. Okay, and again, this is the jobs panel where I can examine all the jobs that are coming into the Dremio panel. And if I needed more detail, I could click over here to get a deeper view, and I can actually see where the time was spent in executing the query. So I can see, hey, how much is spent in planning, how much is spent in getting the metadata. I can identify sort of, hey, what is causing things to take time sometimes, and I can better kind of understand the SQL that's being run. Take a look at this visual profile. That's going to give me a visual breakdown of what was done, and I can go even in more detail with like a raw profile. So basically, if you really want to kind of understand what's going on, how's the Dremio engine sort of executing your queries, you have the visibility into that, and you can even use this AI button here to generate an explanation of what you see here for you. Okay, so that way you can have a more natural language explanation of what may have happened with the query. Very useful for queries that maybe were there was an error in the query and you're trying to understand what the error is, but then looking at all this might not necessarily make it obvious. You can use the explain this job to kind of help make it more obvious. Okay, but I mentioned that I wanted to do something else with the wikis and the tagging. Okay, so if we go to our project settings, generally most of Dremio's features are automatically turned on when you create a new account. There's one feature that is not. So you'll notice here, it's a preview feature to be able to generate wikis and labels using AI. So in your project settings, you'll go to Preferences and turn that on. So now going forward, now watch what I can do. So I'm going to go back to that data set, or a data set. So I'll go back to the gold data sets this time. So backlog by zip daily. Okay, notice that now next to this labeling piece, there's this little AI button. Okay, and again, whenever you see this AI symbol, that means I can use AI, okay, to help me out. So in this case, I can use AI to generate some tags. So what it's going to do, in this case, I didn't really think of anything particular for that one. Okay, but I can also add my own manual tags. So in this case, I just might label it gold because it's a gold data set. Okay, and then here I can generate a wiki. So I click here in the AI and this generate wiki button down here. And Jenna's going to give you a basic wiki. It's like the schema description of the data set. So you see here, like it's a description of the data set based on the sample data. It shows you a sample record and shows you the schema. Okay, and it's good. It's a good habit to make sure you always curate your wiki, because when you use Dremio's AI features, it'll actually pull all the semantic information, the lineage of the data set, the wiki of the data set, all this metadata to better understand your data, to give you better results more of the time. Okay, Dremio's built-in semantic layer goes a long way in allowing you to be able to do natural language analytics, and Dremio has that all kind of built in. There's no need for you to go get a separate semantic layer product. Semantic layer is built into Dremio, and you can use that semantic layer across all your data, not just the Iceberg tables in your Dremio catalog, but all the other data sources you connect. Okay, cool. So we demonstrated that. But now I can use this to do a search feature. So for example, if I just was looking for like gold data sets, I could type in gold. And so you can show me that, hey, it's not just searching for tags. It's going to search for folders that might have the word gold in it. It's going to search for things that might have the tag of gold. Okay. Search for queries that have ran with gold. And I can be more specific and say, hey, I only want to look for tables. Okay. So then no results found for gold. I can go say, hey, I'm looking for views specifically, and they can say, hey, look, that one matches. Okay, I can look for like UDFs because you can create custom functions. So bottom line is I can use this to do a pretty nice search, okay, of everything on Dremio so people can discover what they have access to. Cool. Okay, so we've established that. Now, a couple of things I'd like to show you is I want to show you your project settings. We've kind of seen a little bit of it, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it, show you what else is kind of going on here. So again, remember, every project represents a catalog. Okay, so you have that built-in catalog into each project. Each project is a different catalog, and you can change the settings of that catalog here. Now, also, to run queries, you have engines. So by default, in a free account, you're going to have this extra small preview engine, and that's it. If you need to add more engines, you do need to upgrade to a paid account. But when you work on an engine, just to show you what those settings are, okay, you can choose the size of the engine. So you can see there's several different sizes. I can even make it smaller, okay, if I want to, depending on sort of like the query power I need. Okay, and basically, hey, what the spend I want. I can choose the amount of backed concurrency per replica. Okay, so that means how many queries can one sort of engine handle at the same time, or is allowed to handle at the same time. So in this case, 4 queries can be run by this engine at any given time. I can increase that, decrease that. I can also set, hey, how many replicas there are. So basically, in this case, I say max 3 replicas. So in this case, hey, if there's 5 queries coming in, well, what it would do is it would spin up a replica of that engine to go handle that 5th query. So that way you still make sure that you can handle all the queries simultaneously that you want, but you can go as low as like 0 replicas. So you can say, hey, you know what, it's okay, there's no engines running, which is ideal because you don't want to pay for an engine if there's no queries running. Okay, so this way it spins down all your engines when no activity exists. And then I can go even more advanced and say, hey, when do we spin down that last replica? Okay, so in this case, 60 minutes of no activity would result in that last engine being shut down. Okay, and then I can set some other settings, but basically really be able to manage sort of the compute that's available. So I can create like a large engine for really high priority queries for a very high level of processing. But how do I make sure that a bunch of small queries don't end up using my extra large engine when I want other jobs to use that engine? Well, this is where we get the engine routing piece. Here I can actually create rules that say, hey, when this query matches this rule, it goes to this engine. And you can specify basically, you can say, hey, if a specific user, if it's a query from a specific user, send it to a particular engine. Or if they're part of a particular group, so a particular role. If they're sending a query through a particular interface, if they are using AI functions. So you can determine sort of, hey, what kind of queries you could go where, or if you even want to reject that query. So maybe you want to shut down the ability to do queries that are using AI functions altogether. You could route all AI function queries to be rejected right here. So you have this flexibility to kind of help control what's going into your Dremio cluster. So that way, again, you can make sure that you're getting the most value out of your Dremio system as possible. Now remember, I created that reflection earlier. Here I can actually see that reflection being where it was created. So I can see here that that was a reflection that I manually created. Now, if I have to specify that it's manual, that must mean that it also must be automatic. So remember, Dremio can autonomously, one of the Dremio's cool features is autonomous performance management. We've seen one level of that in the ability to optimize tables autonomously, but another really great angle of that is Dremio can also autonomously accelerate the tables, meaning put in reflections. So this is going to be on by default. So that'd be in preferences. So you can see here, autonomous reflections is turned on. So that means like once a day, Dremio is going to go in there, take a look at all your query patterns and create reflections based on those query patterns to accelerate the queries it expects to keep coming in. So it's like, hey, this query's been run like 10 times. Let's optimize for that query. So this way, this is especially useful for like, a world where you're using a lot of AI, because AI is going to constantly be changing sort of what queries are coming in. So having the ability for Dremio to respond dynamically to the queries that are coming in allows your Lakehouse to stay fast as things change. But for your manual reflections, you will get a reflection score as it gets used, and you can use that to determine whether you need to delete that or not. Like if you get a really low score, like a 0, a 10, probably no one's using the reflection. It's just a waste of storage. You can just delete it right here, clear out that storage. Here you can see the number of queries that were accelerated by that reflection. In this case, so far 1. Okay. Here we have a monitor panel. As you use Dremio more and more, you're going to see more and more data here to help kind of monitor sort of how Dremio is being used. So you can see, hey, which data sets are being used, which folders are being used a lot. Hey, what does your autonomous reflections look like? More insights on jobs. So you're going to have all sorts of information here about different insights you can look at. Again, this becomes much more rich with data as you have more activity going on. You can configure if you want those sort of one-click buttons for Tableau and Power BI. Okay, so those are your project settings. So now that we've seen that. But, I've mentioned the AI functions a few times. So let's start going through some of the AI features in Dremio. So that means the AI functions, the AI agent, and the MCP server. Okay, so first let's do the AI functions. So for that, I do have a couple examples in this repository. So in this case, if you want to see like really detailed examples, see this media AI example, these logistics AI example are both sort of very heavy examples. If you really kind of want to see a long one, I'm going to show you a quick one that's this recipes example. Okay, essentially what we're doing here is we're going to use this AI function called AI classify. Okay, so essentially we're going to create our recipes folder. Then we're going to create a table in there that's called recipes that essentially has 3 recipes inside of it. Now what we want to do is that right now the recipes are just recipes. They're just an array of ingredients. What we'd like to know is whether that recipe should be classified as mild, medium, or spicy. But just based on the ingredients alone, there's not sort of like a logical, absolutely logical way to measure that. Okay, it's just, you can infer it, but it's not, again, it's not sort of a set thing. Okay, it's not like I can mathematically determine this based on a variety of ingredients. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to allow the AI to kind of make that call. So we're going to pass the list of ingredients as a string to the AI. So that's what we're seeing being done here. I'm passing the list of ingredients for each record and saying, hey, and identify the spice level of this list of ingredients and put that into a category of either mild, medium, or spicy. And the results of this will become a column called spice level. Okay, so that's what this SQL is doing. But the thing is that I'm just using I'm using just data that's in the record to do the evaluation, but Dremio gives you the ability to actually use other data in your data lake. So if you have a data lake that has 3 ADLS, a MinIO connected to your Dremio account that has like a folder filled of images or a folder filled of PDFs, you can actually use that for these AI functions. Okay, so I could sit there and say, hey, like classify this application that's this PDF, based on this prompt that describes what the rules will be. Okay, is it a approved application or a rejected application? Something like that. So in that case, let's go run that SQL. So I'm just going to paste it right into there. And we'll just run that. Okay, let that run. And one thing to think about when you use these AI functions is, like in this case, I'm saving it as a view because it's just an example. But do keep in mind that if you use an AI function in a view, you're going to be doing those AI processes every time someone reaches that view unless you reflect it. So thing to keep in mind there, to minimize how many times it's going to hit up your AI and use tokens to do the same AI processing over and over again. And plus, you don't want the values to change because, again, changes in the model or just, randomness could result in the AI coming with different answers on different runs, which you don't necessarily want because you want consistency. It's probably better to materialize anytime you're using AI functions, actually materialize it as a table. So ideal world, this instead of creating a view like I do here, I should have done something like a create table as or CTAS statement where I create a new table from those results. So that way those results don't change when people query the data over time. Just something to keep in mind. Again, different use cases, there might be situations where you do want that to be reevaluated by the AI every time. So in this case, again, here I have the recipes. So again, we take a look at the physical table. If I query that, okay, we're going to see that table basically just has the array of ingredients. Okay, so we can see that the array of ingredients there. Okay, but now if I go back to the enhanced table where we use the AI function, okay, it's going to run that. It's going to run that, and again, it's going to be doing all that AI stuff. So this one's going to take a tiny bit longer as it runs each of those prompts to the AI 3 times, one for each record. Okay, because again, I did it as a view, so it's running it every time. I can see like there's the spice level column. Okay, so here's the ingredients, and now the AI has determined that these 2 recipes are medium, and this last one is spicy. Okay, awesome. So there's 3 different AI functions. So if we go to the function list here, I can see that there's AI classify. That's the one that we just saw where I can say, hey, based on this prompt, classify this into one of these categories. There's AI complete, where I'm just really passing a prompt. So I'm going to pass a prompt that could use data from the record to get a response back. So this is maybe I want to call them this like a summary of the record. So yeah, again, good for just creating like a summary column or a description column. AI complete, this one is going to be one of the most, well, that's the one we just talked about. AI generate is going to be probably the most interesting one, because what this does, it's going to create essentially a mini table. So basically, this would be like, hey, there's these fields in this form, so I want you to look at all the PDFs in this particular folder in my data lake, read the PDF, and based on what you see in the PDF, put a value in each of these columns. Okay, and what it does, it basically returns a struct of all these columns that you want that you can then flatten out. Okay, but basically I could now sit there and create a view that's going to go through every PDF of all these applications in a folder and then give me all the fields as structured data fields without me having to go manually like enter the data from every field in every form every time, making it much easier to kind of process or look at an image or whatnot. So that's super powerful. And you can kind of see an example of that there. Like here's an example. In this case, it's just taking it from like a JSON file. But there's a function called list files. Let me see here. List. It's in the docs. So let me go to the docs. Docs.dremio.com, just so you can see an example of this. Okay, I'm looking for list files. Okay, and basically what this does, it basically creates a table out of data you have in your data lake. So this is kind of what it would look like. I'd say, hey, list files, and then I point to, hey, where in my data lake? So this would be like the name of your data lake source. So let's say S3, and then the path in that data lake source of the folder with like the PDF files, the CSV files, whatever files. Okay, and with that, you can then use that in AI functions. Like, let me go back to an AI complete example so you can see what that looks like. Okay, let's find. But yeah, I mean, this one doesn't show that, but in this case, you could in there put something like from. Basically say, hey, use these files, because basically what you're doing is you're adding. The from would be the list files function, because you're basically saying, hey, from this table of files, do this. Okay. So that's a cool thing you can do. Okay, those are the AI functions. But again, that's not the only thing that Dremio does in helping use AI. We've seen the AI agent work in a few places. We've seen the AI agent that it can be used to explain my different jobs in my jobs panel, that I can use it to generate wikis and tags. But I can also use it to just better understand. So if I go over here to the AI agent, I can do things like tell me what data sets I have access to. Okay. Now, in this situation, what it's going to do is that it'll make different tool calls. So if you're familiar with how AI agents work, is that they're generally provided tools that allow them to do things with, in this case, with Dremio. So in this case is using the tool to get the information schema with a list of tables from Dremio, and is now just looking at the information to give us a nice summary of what we have access to. Now in this case, the AI agent is always working as the user you're logged in as. So you won't be able to see data sets that user doesn't have access to. So it's governed. Okay, you're not going to be able to use the AI agent to get access to data sets you don't have access to. Okay, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to just give that a moment to run. And that's going to be the same thing for the MCP server, because later on I'll show you the MCP server. It'll ask you to authenticate when you try to connect. Okay, list the accessible table. So here she is showing me not only like the names of the tables, so like the namespaces, and whether it's a view or a table. It's actually even trying to give me a summary of the table, a summary of the SQL that defines it. So I get a nice bit of information here. Now we have this government data set. What I want to do is, what if I want to like generate a visualization? Okay, so I might say, hey, where's my silver code? Let's say daily KPIs by category. Command C. Maybe I want to take a look at a visualization of the data. What would be a good type of chart to visualize that data set? Okay, I can ask it that question. It'll give me a recommendation, and then we can actually generate that chart. So while if I were creating a dashboard that multiple people in the company are going to access on an ongoing basis, I probably would still use a Tableau or a Power BI to create that dashboard. If I just need like an ad hoc visualization, maybe just to answer a question that I'm looking up right now, ad hoc, or to just screenshot and put into like a PowerPoint presentation, you'll see this is actually very powerful. Okay. So right now it's again doing the AI agent thing where it's getting more information about the data set before it comes back with its recommendation. So we're going to let it do that. Okay, give it a few more moments. But again, if you've been following along with this video, I hope that you create or have already created your free Dremio environment and have been trying a lot of these things out. So here is saying, it's giving you a few examples. Okay. It says, do you want to run for this chart? I can generate it and validate it. A visualization build. I can put a SQL and a Vega Lite config for a chart. Okay. Yep. Create me. I'll just ask it to do the first chart. Yes. Please create the time series chart for me. Okay, and then it's gonna go do its thing, and then assuming all goes well, AI agents aren't always like batting 100, but assuming all goes well, I should have a visualization that we can then look at. What I'll do, oh, it looks like it's moving along. Okay, so it's running the query, so it's got the query that it wants to run. You can see that there. So now it's going to pull in the data, and then we should see the visualization in just a moment. Okay, coming up soon, coming up soon. And again, there's a lot of seed data you can use here to kind of just try out Dremio on top of the sample data that's already kind of automatically built in. Oh, what did it say? Oh, that whole request just, that one just disappeared for a second. I think it's just because I switched out, so let me try that again. I would create the time series chart for me. Okay. I will pause the recording so that way you don't have to kind of wait for the AI agent to do its thing. Okay, and then here we have the chart. Okay, not the prettiest chart because, again, it was very basic information. But we can actually see the query that it used to run to create that chart. So that's the nice thing about when you generate these visualizations in Dremio. Although, again, during that time that was paused, I did realize that one of the reasons it was taking a little long is because it was putting a misplaced quotation mark in the way the AI was trying to address it. So just by clarifying it and telling the AI, hey, here's the exact name of the data set you want, it cut right through that. But now I have my visualization. Okay, and I can again see the query that created, and I can actually see the table of data. So here's like the table of data for that record. Again, very basic data sets that I'm working with here that are from my scripts, but I guess you see the premise here that I can create these visualizations and I can look at the query and the table data to make sure that like the visualization isn't nonsense. That, hey, this is a query that makes sense to me. The data in the table makes sense to me. This all looks good. I feel comfortable, trusting this particular visualization. Cool. So now that we've seen the AI agent in action, and again, I can use this to do all sorts of things. Like I can use it to write documentation for me if I want to write even more fleshed out documentation on a particular data set and copy that into the wiki. Lots of really cool use cases. But also I can use the MCP server to bring this functionality outside. Like maybe I like using Claude as my daily driver. Okay, I can connect this to Claude. Now, of course, there's some caveats. Like if you're using Claude as part of your work, and it's like a work provided Claude account, so it's part of a corporate wrapper, then that has to be then it's usually same thing with ChatGPT. It would require the corporate account owner to add these integrations in, and then make them available to their individual users. But if you had your own personal cloud account, okay, I'm gonna go take a look at mine just to show you what I mean. Okay, all you'd have to do is you would just click over here, and then you would just go to settings, and then from settings you're going to click on connectors. Okay, and here's where you can connect other integrations, okay, like MCP servers. So I already have like one Dremio one, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but if you want to add yours, you would just add a custom connector. You would name it like, let's say, Dremio MCP. Then you would just go back to your Dremio account, go to your project settings, and then copy over this MCP endpoint URL. Over here, that would go here. Then here you would basically put in your email address for your account, and then here you would put in your PAT token. Okay, and then what's going to happen is that once you have that all set up, I can then connect it, and then what's going to do is going to pop up and ask me to authenticate the Dremio. Okay, so then here I would log back into Dremio to authenticate, and then now going forward, I would then be able to use that in my additional cloud prompts. You have similar things you can do with like CLI applications like Gemini CLI, or using ChatGPT. If you're using ChatGPT in developer mode, is where they're going to have that features currently available. So you can then take all that functionality that we see in the AI agent built into Dremio and bring it to your particular preferred agentic interface or a custom AI agent or anything like that, which is really useful because you might want to use it alongside other MCP servers that bring other functionality to the table. Cool. So we've seen that, hey, with Dremio, I can connect all my data, I can curate my data, I can govern my data, I can use AI to ask questions of my data, to help categorize and document my data. I can use it to act as a backbone for building my own custom AI agents. But other thing I want to point out is that Dremio catalog is built on Apache Polaris, a open source Iceberg catalog, which means it is openly accessible to any tool you want. So I have this blog over here, dremio.com/blog. Make sure you check out the Dremio blog on a regular basis. But basically, it's a blog version of this workshop, hands-on introduction to Dremio Cloud Next Gen. And at the very bottom of the blog, I have an example of how we can use this with Spark. Okay. Cool. Connecting your Dremio catalog and other engines like Spark. So in this case, just to test it out, you may want to go run, if you have Docker installed on your computer, you can just use this simple command to run Docker. So I'm going to do it off screen because I need to copy my PAT token into here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just show you so you can see it. I can always just delete the PAT token as soon as I'm done recording this video. Okay, so there's the command, but I need to have my PAT token over there. So what I'm going to do is go over the Dremio, click my account settings, create a new personal token that's only going to be active for 1 day. Okay, and this is going to be for video, call it. And now I have this token, so I can copy the token. Okay, and then I would paste that into here. Good. Okay, and then I will run this Docker command, and that'll get Spark started up on my laptop. So again, what's happening now is I'm getting actually a separate engine, Apache Spark, running on my laptop. So no longer am I going to pass the query through Dremio for a Dremio engine to execute. This may be because I'm doing some sort of data pipeline to ingest data into Iceberg, or there's any tool that supports Iceberg REST catalog can then connect the Dremio catalog in this way. But when I run the queries through other engines, those don't draw down my Dremio credits. So again, the only time you are drawing down your Dremio credits, okay, these credits that we see all the way over here, the only time you're drawing those down are when you're using Dremio's managed solution. So Dremio's query engine to run a query, Dremio's storage, if you're using a managed storage for your catalog, or Dremio's LLM when you're using the AI agent if you don't configure your own LLM. Now with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this script from the Spark, which should work just as is. Because again, it's all assuming Dremio has the namespace, so I just go to localhost 888, that's where I have Spark running. Or technically I have my notebook server running here, which has access to Spark. I create a new Python notebook. I'm going to copy that code. Okay, and essentially what you see here is that I'm specifying the URLs that are needed. So like this is where the URL for the Dremio catalog. It basically can tell which account catalog you're using based on your PAT token. Your PAT token kind of lets it know that, hey, it's this account. Okay, here's where the Spark will need to authenticate. Now we're getting our PAT token from the environmental variable. Now in this case, my project's actually called first project. Remember, I mentioned that I took the dash out. So the catalog name for Spark purposes is the project name. So whatever you called your project name is, you can see that in your project settings. That's what you would put as your project here. Okay, then all these are settings for configuring Dremio catalog in Spark. Okay, this is just basically saying, hey, Spark, download these particular Java libraries for working with AWS S3 and Iceberg. Here I'm saying, hey, load up the special Iceberg SQL into Spark. Here I'm saying, hey, here's the details about Dremio catalog. Okay, so that way you know where it is. And then here's like, okay, here's all my authentication logic to use Dremio's special authentication manager, which is going to be a much more secure way to access it. That's actually been contributed. Dremio contributes to open source, so that's been contributed to the Iceberg project, and over time should become just part of the Iceberg project, at which case you won't necessarily need this whole bottom section. Okay, and again, you don't have to use the auth manager. You can use the default auth mechanism when working with the REST catalog, but this allows for better token refresh logic and things like that. Okay, so this again just basically configures the catalog with Spark. We start our Spark session. I'm going to create another namespace in the catalog, so I'm going to create a namespace called DB. Then I'm going to create a couple new tables in that namespace. Then I'm going to create some data frames, and then write those data frames to those tables. That's what this code is doing. So I can just go ahead and run it. And we're going to see that, hey, again, this is not running through Dremio. I'm using Dremio's catalog. So these are making changes to the tables, the listing of tables in the Dremio catalog, but it's happening external to Dremio, not through the Dremio query engine. And again, the reason why I emphasize this is to show you the benefit of working with an Iceberg Lakehouse is that since Iceberg is a open standard, you can take that catalog and connect it to whatever tool a particular team needs to get the data in and to get the data out of your Iceberg Lakehouse. Okay, it gives you that flexibility. Okay, so you can see here it's kind of getting to the end of the job. So you can see here it has connected to Dremio catalog. It's now created the namespaces. It created the tables, created the data frames. And now it's just got to write those data frames to the tables. Okay, so it's doing that. Takes a second. Again, this is using my laptop to run the query to process the data. Okay, so it's, and then it's done. Okay, so now what I should be able to do is I should be able to go query the data from Dremio. Because anything that happens in one engine, if it's in the Iceberg catalog, should be visible to all engines. And that's the beauty of this. Okay, so I should be able to go to over here and see where you already see it. You see that the DB namespace has already been added to my catalog. I can go in there, see the two tables that were created, and I can go run a query on that. Wonderful. See, I made that update with Spark external to Dremio, and it was immediately visible in Dremio because Iceberg has that cool level of open interoperability. So again, you have all sorts of open layers here in the Dremio Lakehouse, whether it's being able to bring your own storage, being able to bring your own LLM, being able to bring your own engine to queries on your Iceberg tables, but you also have the ability to bring in your data wherever it is. It doesn't have to be stored in Dremio catalog, so you can bring your data from your databases, your data warehouse, your data lakes, your other data lakehouse catalogs. Dremio is an open lakehouse platform, but it does it in an easy shell that's easy to use and easy to get value out of. And that's the reason why Dremio provides so much value, and why I hope that you will enjoy your trial with Dremio and continue using Dremio even after that. Well, have a great day. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and got a chance to kind of get hands-on with many of Dremio's features. And again, query for a few days so you can really see things like autonomous reflections in action. And yeah, have fun and try out Dremio, and encourage your friends to do so too, because friends don't let friends not use Dremio. I'll see you all later. Have a great day and enjoy.